The Vialori Dominion had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds. Their fleets were so large that no one could count all the ships. Every species in the galaxy knew to bow before the Vialori, or face total destruction. High Archon Velthorin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Supremacy. He was tall, with blue-gray skin, and 4 eyes that glowed with cold light. He had conquered 17 worlds himself. He had never lost a single battle. Today, he was leading 300 warships to a small planet called New Cascadia. It was a human colony. One of the first worlds this new species had settled outside their home system. Velthorin had studied the reports about humans. They were weak creatures. They lived for less than 100 years. They had only been traveling between stars for about a century. They had no great empire, no ancient wisdom, no powerful weapons, and yet they had refused to pay tribute to the Dominion. Foolish animals, Velthorin said to his officers. They do not understand what we are. After today, the survivors will teach their children to fear us. His fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel near New Cascadia. The planet was blue and green, covered with forests and oceans. Orbiting the planet was a small collection of human ships. Velthorin counted them. 42 vessels. Some of them looked like they were made from spare parts. Others were clearly old cargo ships with weapons attached to their hulls. He almost laughed. This was what the humans sent to fight the Dominion? Open a channel, he ordered. Let them surrender. The communication screen flickered, and a human face appeared. It was a woman with dark hair and calm eyes. She wore a simple, gray uniform. Behind her, Velthorin could see other humans working at their stations. I am Admiral Chen Wei-Lin of the United Terran Defense Force, she said. Her voice was steady. You are entering protected space. Turn your ships around and leave. Velthorin stared at her. For a moment, he could not believe what he had heard. This creature, this mayfly with her tiny fleet, was telling him to leave? Human, he said slowly. I have conquered species that had ruled their stars for longer than your kind has existed. I have 300 warships. You have 42 pieces of garbage. Surrender now, or I will turn your colony into ash. Admiral Chen did not look afraid. She did not look angry. She simply nodded, as if she had expected this answer. Then we have nothing more to discuss, she said. The screen went dark. Velthorin gave the order to attack. His fleet moved forward in the standard Vialori formation, a great crescent shape that would surround the enemy and crush them from all sides. This formation had worked for thousands of years. No species had ever broken it. The human ships began to move. At first, Velthorin thought they were trying to retreat, but then he noticed something strange. They were not running away. They were spreading out in a pattern he did not recognize. What are they doing? He asked. His tactical officer studied the screens. I do not know. High Archon. This formation is not in our records. The battle began. Vialori ships fired their weapons, sending bright beams of energy toward the human fleet. The humans fired back with missiles and projectile weapons, primitive but fast. Then Admiral Chen did something impossible. In the middle of the battle, she changed her entire formation. Her ships moved like a flock of birds, shifting positions in perfect coordination. They slipped through a tiny gap in the Vialori crescent, a gap so small that no one had ever noticed it before. Suddenly, 12 human ships were behind the Vialori line, firing at the engines of Velthorin's largest vessels. How did they know about that weakness? The tactical officer shouted. That gap has existed in our formation for centuries. No one has ever exploited it. More human ships were moving now, each one seeming to act independently, but somehow working together. They did not follow the rules of space combat. They did not form neat lines or hold defensive positions. They attacked from every direction at once. Velthorin watched in horror as ship after ship exploded on his screens. The humans were not just fighting. They were learning. Every time the Vylori tried a new tactic, the humans adapted within minutes. 19 minutes after the battle began, 78 Vylori warships were burning wreckage. The humans had lost only 9 ships. Admiral Chen's face appeared on the screen again. She was not smiling. She did not gloat. She simply looked at Velthoron with those same calm eyes. "You can send more ships?" she said. "You can send 1,000 ships, or 10,000. We will be here. And we will learn from every battle. Every time you attack us, we will get better. Can you say the same?" Velthoron felt something he had not felt in 300 years of warfare. He felt fear. "All ships," he said quietly. "Retreat." His officers stared at him. No Vylori fleet had ever retreated. It was against everything they believed in. "High Archon," one of them began. "I said retreat," Velthoron roared. "Now, before we lose everything." The Vylori fleet turned and fled, leaving the burning remains of their comrades behind. On the bridge of her small flagship, Admiral Chen watched them go. Her officers were cheering, but she did not celebrate. "That was only the beginning," she said quietly. "They will come back with more ships and more anger. We need to be ready." She looked out at the stars, at the vast darkness that held 1,000 Vylori worlds. "Send a message to Earth," she ordered. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them the war has begun." The message traveled across the light years, carrying news that would change the galaxy forever. A species that had been among the stars for barely a century had done the impossible. They had made the Vylori run. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with a radio heard the same impossible story. The Vylori Dominion, the most powerful empire in known space, had retreated from battle. Not just retreated, they had been beaten. Badly. Grand Mediator Sorixan called an emergency meeting of the Galactic Concord. The Concord was not a government. It was more like a place where different species could talk without shooting at each other. 47 species sent representatives to the Great Crystal Chamber, floating in orbit around a neutral star. Sorixan was a tall, thin being covered in silver scales. She had served as Grand Mediator for 200 years. In all that time, she had never seen the chamber so crowded with frightened faces. "Let us begin," she said, her voice carrying through the vast space. "We are here to discuss the humans." Murmurs filled the chamber. Many of these species had never even heard of humans until recently. Earth was far from the center of galactic civilization. Humans were supposed to be a young, unimportant species just beginning to explore the stars. Ambassador Krelmoth of the Insectoid Collective stood up. He was covered in hard brown shell, with many eyes that reflected the light. "This must be a mistake," he said. "The Vylori have ruled for 12,000 years. They do not lose to primitive newcomers. Someone has exaggerated the reports." Tractas. 2022. Tractas. 2022. Everyone turned to look at the Vylori representative. He sat alone in his section of the chamber, his 4 eyes dim with shame. He said nothing. "The reports are accurate," Sorixan said. "We have confirmed them through multiple sources. The human fleet was outnumbered more than 7 to 1. They still won. 78 Vylori ships were destroyed in less than 20 minutes. The chamber erupted in noise. Different species shouted questions in dozens of languages. Their translators struggled to keep up. "How is this possible? What weapons do they have? Are they connected to some older power we don't know about?" Sorixan raised her hand for silence. "We have gathered intelligence on the humans. What we have learned is disturbing. One. She activated a display that filled the center of the chamber with images and data. Pictures of human ships appeared, along with records of their military organization. "First, their technology," she said. "It is not superior to ours. In many ways, it is actually inferior. Their ships are slower. Their weapons are less powerful. Their shields are weaker. Then how did they win? Krelmoth demanded. Because technology is not everything. A new voice spoke, deep and slow like grinding stone. Everyone turned to see the Kavathi observer rise from her seat. The Kavathi were among the oldest species in the galaxy. They did not build empires or fight wars. They simply watched and remembered. Their observers had witnessed the rise and fall of 100 civilizations. This observer was ancient even by Kavathi standards. Her body was like a mountain that had learned to walk. Gray and patient and impossible to hurry. I have studied the battle recordings, she said. I have studied human history. I understand now why they won. The chamber fell silent. When a Kavathi observer spoke, wise beings listened. Human military commanders do not follow rigid plans, she explained. They are given objectives, not instructions. They are expected to find their own way to victory. Each captain, each ship, can make decisions without asking permission. That is chaos, one of the ambassadors said. That is no way to run a fleet. No, the observer replied. That is adaptation. The Valori use the same formations they have used for thousands of years. They are perfect formations, developed over centuries, but they never change. The humans looked at those formations and found the weaknesses in minutes. She showed recordings from the battle. The human ships moved in ways that seemed random at first, but when viewed together, they formed patterns that shifted and changed constantly. They are not following a single plan, she said. They are following a shared purpose. Each captain thinks for themselves, but they all think toward the same goal. It is like fighting an army where every soldier is also a general. Ambassador Krelmoth shook his head. That should not work. Without central command, they should fall apart, and yet they do not fall apart. They communicate constantly. They share information instantly. When one captain discovers something new, every other captain learns it seconds later. They are individuals who have learned to think as one. Sorixan studied the data with growing concern. There is more, isn't there? The Kavathi observer was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that made the entire chamber go cold. They have been fighting each other for their entire existence. She showed human history. Wars going back thousands of years. Armies clashing on fields of mud. Ships battling on oceans. Aircraft filling skies with fire. And finally, terrible weapons that could destroy entire cities in a single flash. Every strategy we know, they have already used against themselves, she continued. Every trick, every trap, every clever idea. They have spent 10,000 years learning to defeat the most dangerous enemy in the universe. What enemy? Sorixan asked. The observer's ancient eyes swept across the chamber. Other humans. They have been preparing for us their entire existence. They just did not know it. Silence filled the chamber. The representatives of 47 species stared at the images of human warfare, at the endless cycle of conflict and adaptation that had shaped this strange species. Can they be stopped? Sorixan finally asked. The Kavathi observer considered the question for a long time. When she spoke, her words would be remembered for centuries. Not by force, she said. They have already defeated every kind of force. The question is not whether we can stop them. The question is what they will do when they realize they are stronger than everyone else. She turned to leave, her massive body moving with slow dignity. We should hope they are kind, she added. Because if they are not kind, nothing in this galaxy can save us from them. The meeting ended without any decisions. No one knew what to do about the humans. But everyone agreed on one thing. The galaxy had changed forever. High Archon Velthoron stood before the Valori Supreme Council. His shame burned inside him like poison. He had been the greatest military commander in the Dominion. Now he was known as the first Valori to run from battle. Give me another chance, he said. The Supreme Council looked down at him from their high seats. They were old and cruel. The leaders of an empire built on fear. You want revenge, one of them said. That is good. Revenge is useful. They gave him everything he asked for. 2,000 capital ships, 10,000 support vessels. The largest fleet ever assembled in Vylori history. A force that had once conquered entire civilizations in a single campaign. Destroy their homeworld, the council commanded. Burn Earth to ashes. Make them an example that the galaxy will never forget. Veltheron smiled for the first time since New Cascadia. It will be done. 4. On Earth, Admiral Chen Wei-Lin received the reports with a calm face. Her officers were not as calm. 2,000 capital ships, her aide said, his voice shaking. We have less than 300. Even with all our colonies combined, we cannot match those numbers. Then we will not try to match them, Chen said. We will do something else. She had 40 days before the Vylori fleet would arrive. 40 days to prepare for an enemy 50 times larger than her own force. She gathered her commanders in a great hall in Geneva. Admirals and captains from every human colony filled the room. They were all looking at her, waiting for a miracle. We cannot win a straight fight, she told them. So, we will not fight straight. The Vylori expect us to meet them in battle. They expect formations and tactics. We will give them something they have never seen before. For 40 days, humanity worked like it had never worked before. Mining ships scattered billions of tiny particles throughout the solar system. These particles would confuse enemy sensors, making it hard to tell what was real and what was fake. Cargo ships and civilian transports were fitted with special equipment that could project false images. A single small ship could now look like a battleship. A group of shuttles could appear to be an entire fleet. Every moon, every asteroid, every space station became a potential weapon or trap. Missiles were hidden in places the Vylori would never think to look. Old satellites were turned into bombs. And Chen prepared her real fleet in secret, hiding them behind the massive bulk of Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system. When the Vylori arrived, Veltheron saw exactly what he expected to see. His sensors showed multiple human fleets spread across the solar system, 17 battle groups in impossible positions, surrounding his force from every direction. But something was wrong. The numbers did not make sense. How do they have so many ships? His tactical officer asked. Our intelligence said they had only 300 vessels. These readings show over 2,000. Veltheron studied the display with narrowed eyes. It is a trick. Some of those fleets must be fake. Which ones, High Archon? That was the question. The human electronic warfare was unlike anything they had encountered. Every time they tried to scan a fleet, the readings changed. Ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts. We advance toward Earth, Veltheron decided. Let them show us which ships are real, by firing at us. The Vylori Armada moved forward in a massive wave. They passed the outer planets. Saturn with its beautiful rings. Then Jupiter. Then the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Nothing attacked them. The human fleets stayed at a distance, watching but not engaging. Veltheron grew more confident. They are afraid, he said. Their fake fleets cannot help them. They reached Mars. Earth was close now, a blue dot, growing larger in their view screens. Then the trap closed. Ships erupted from Saturn's rings. Vessels that had been hiding in the ice and rock. They were modified submarines, designed for Earth's oceans, but rebuilt for space. Their dark hulls had been invisible to Vylori sensors. At the same moment, cargo haulers throughout the fleet zone dropped their disguises. What had looked like civilian ships revealed hidden weapons, firing missiles by the hundreds, and behind them, hidden by Jupiter's massive shadow, Admiral Chen's real battle fleet finally showed itself. All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessels, Chen ordered. The human fleet struck like a knife, cutting through the confused Vylori formation. They did not try to destroy every enemy ship. They aimed only for the leaders, the flagships, the communication centers. Veltheron watched his carefully organized armada fall into chaos. Without their command ships, the Vylori captains did not know what to do. They had always followed orders. They had never learned to think for themselves. The humans had no such problem. Each human ship fought independently, finding opportunities, exploiting weaknesses, communicating constantly with their allies. Return fire, Velthorin screamed. Form defensive positions, but his fleet was too large to reorganize quickly. The Valori way of war depended on perfect formations and central command. The humans had destroyed that command in the first minutes of battle. The Battle of Sol lasted 11 hours. When it was over, more than 60% of the Valori Armada was destroyed or disabled. Human losses were less than 15%. Velthorin stood on his damaged bridge, surrounded by smoke and sparks. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his screen. She looked tired but focused. "You can surrender now," she said. "Or, you can die here. The choice is yours." Velthorin wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight to the last ship, the last crew member, the last breath, but he looked around at the survivors, at the young officers who still believed they could live through this day. "I surrender," he said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. Chen nodded. "Your surviving ships will be escorted out of the solar system. Go home. Tell your masters what happened here. Tell them, Earth is not for conquest. Not today. Not ever." The Valori fleet limped away, leaving behind the wreckage of their greatest armada. On Earth, people celebrated in the streets. They had faced the most powerful empire in the galaxy and survived. But Admiral Chen did not celebrate. She knew this was not the end. It was only the beginning. After the Battle of Sol, the Galactic Concord could no longer ignore humanity. The young species had defeated the Valori twice. This was not luck. This was not accident. Something about humans was different, and the galaxy needed to understand what. Delegations arrived at Earth from dozens of species. Scientists, diplomats, military observers, and intelligence agents all came with the same question. How did they do it? The humans welcomed them with strange openness. They did not hide their cities or their technology. They invited the aliens to visit their schools, their factories, their military academies. They answered questions freely, as if they had nothing to fear. This alone confused many of the visitors. In the galaxy, knowledge was power. Species protected their secrets carefully. The idea of sharing information with strangers was almost unthinkable. The Kavathi observer who had spoken at the Concord meeting came to Earth herself. She spent 3 months traveling across the planet, studying human history and culture. She visited ancient battlefields and modern command centers. She read thousands of years of human writing about war and peace. What she learned disturbed her more than any weapon could. She presented her findings to the Concord in a special closed session. Only the most important representatives were allowed to attend. "I will tell you what makes humans dangerous," she began. "But I warn you, you will not want to hear it." She showed them images from human history. Ancient soldiers marching in formation, knights charging across muddy fields, ships of wood sailing across vast oceans to wage war on distant shores. "Every species learns to fight," she said. "This is natural. What is not natural is how humans fight." She showed them how human warfare had changed over time. Each century brought new weapons, new tactics, new ways to kill. Bows and arrows gave way to guns. Horses gave way to tanks. Ships of wood became ships of steel. "Most species find a way of fighting that works and keep using it," she explained. "The Valori have used the same basic tactics for thousands of years. Why change something that brings victory? But humans never stop changing. They cannot help themselves. They see a problem, and they must solve it. They see a weakness, and they must exploit it." She showed them the human concept of military schools, places where people spent years studying how to fight more effectively. She showed them war games, where humans practiced battles that had never happened, preparing for enemies they had not yet met. They train their young to think about war the way other species think about breathing, she said. It is not cruelty. It is survival. Because humans have always been their own greatest enemy. The display changed to show human conflicts. Two groups of humans, fighting over land. Nations battling for resources. Ideologies clashing in wars that killed millions. In 10,000 years of civilization, humans have never known a century without major war, the observer said. They have killed more of their own kind than any alien species has ever killed of enemies. And through all that killing, they have learned. She listed the lessons. How to fight in any environment, from frozen mountains to burning deserts. How to win with fewer numbers, through surprise and deception. How to lose a battle, but win a war. How to turn defeat into the seed of future victory. Every mistake we might make against them, they have already made against each other, she continued. Every trick we might try, they have already tried. They have been preparing to fight the galaxy for their entire existence. They simply did not know they were preparing. Ambassador Krelmoth raised a claw. You speak of their past. What about their present? What about their future? Ender, the observer was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was heavy with concern. The present is what worries me most. In their past, humans fought each other because they had no other enemy. Now they know they are not alone in the universe. Now they have seen what the galaxy contains. She showed them the human response to the Valori attacks. How quickly they had united against the common threat. How former enemies had become allies overnight. How billions of humans had worked together for a single purpose. When humans fight each other, they are terrifying, she said. When humans fight together, they are unstoppable. The Valori gave them something they never had before. A reason to stop fighting themselves. She said, Unstop. Grand Mediator Sorixon leaned forward. What do you recommend? How should we deal with them? The observer walked slowly to the center of the chamber. Her ancient eyes looked at each representative in turn. You cannot defeat them in war, she said simply. The Valori tried with the largest fleet ever assembled. They failed. Any of you who try will fail worse. Then what do? You make peace. Not because you are weak, but because it is the only choice that makes sense. Humans do not want to rule the galaxy. They want to explore it. They want to trade with it. They want to learn from it. She showed them human art, human music, human stories, tales of adventure and discovery, of meeting new friends in strange places. They dream of the stars the way a child dreams of growing up, she said. They want to know what is out there. That curiosity drove them to space. It will drive them to the edges of the galaxy and beyond. The observer paused, letting her words sink in. The question is not whether humans will spread across the galaxy. They will. Nothing can stop that now. The question is whether they will spread as conquerors or as friends. That choice is not theirs alone. She turned to leave, then stopped. Be kind to them, she said. Be fair to them. Be honest with them. And perhaps, when they have finished growing into what they will become, they will remember that you were not their enemies. She left the chamber in silence. The representatives sat for a long time, thinking about what they had heard. The galaxy was changing. A new power was rising. And for the first time in 12,000 years, that power was not the Valori. It was something stranger and more wonderful. It was humanity. The Valori Supreme Council was furious. 2 defeats, 2 humiliations. Their empire, which had stood for 12,000 years, was now a joke whispered in the halls of the Galactic Concord. High Archon Velthorin knelt before them once again. He had lost most of his fleet at Sol. By all Valori tradition, he should have been executed for such failure. But the council had other plans. One final chance. They told him, take every ship we have left, every vessel from every corner of our empire, Strike at their heart and finish this. Veltheron accepted. He had nothing left but his need for revenge. He gathered what remained of Valori military power. It was still massive, still larger than any human fleet. Ships came from conquered worlds across the Dominion. Warriors who had spent centuries enforcing Valori rule now flew toward human space for one final battle. Their target was New Geneva, a human colony that had become the site of humanity's first interstellar diplomatic summit. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered there to discuss the future of galactic relations. Veltheron's plan was simple: destroy the summit, kill the human leaders, show the galaxy that the Dominion was still strong. But Admiral Chen Wei-Lin was not at New Geneva. She had expected this move. The Valori think in straight lines, she had told her commanders weeks before. They have lost twice, so they will try to win with overwhelming force. They will attack somewhere important, somewhere symbolic. New Geneva is the obvious target. She had prepared accordingly. When Veltheron's fleet arrived at New Geneva, they found something unexpected. Human ships were there. Yes, but they were not alone. Fighting alongside them were Kavathi vessels, ancient and strange. Insectoid collective drones moved in perfect swarms. Ships from a dozen other species held formation with human warships, and leading them all was Admiral Chen aboard her new flagship, the Unity. This is Admiral Chen to the Valori fleet. She broadcast on all channels. You face not just humanity today. You face everyone who is tired of your empire. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated fairly. Continue your attack, and you will be destroyed. Veltheron stared at the display. How had the humans done this? These species had never worked together before. Some of them had been enemies for centuries. Yet here they were, fighting side by side. They are bluffing, he said. Those aliens do not know how to fight with humans. Their coordination will fall apart. He ordered the attack. The battle that followed would be studied for generations. The coalition fleet should have been chaos. Different species used different tactics, different weapons, different ways of thinking. They had never trained together. They had never fought together. But Admiral Chen had spent weeks preparing for this moment. She had studied every species in her coalition. She had learned their strengths and weaknesses. She had created a flexible battle plan that let each group fight in their own way while still supporting the others. The Kavathi ships held back, using their ancient sensors to track enemy movements and share information with the whole fleet. The insectoid drones swarmed enemy fighters, overwhelming them with numbers. Human vessels struck at weak points with precise coordination. And something even more remarkable happened. The coalition learned to work together during the battle itself. When a human ship was in danger, alien vessels moved to protect it. When an alien group needed support, human commanders sent help without being asked. Veltheron watched his fleet crumble. His ships fought bravely, but they were fighting alone. Each Valori vessel was its own island, following orders but never truly working with its neighbors. The coalition was different. They were many species with many ways of thinking, but they had one purpose. And somehow, impossibly, they were becoming something greater than any single species could be. Focus all fire on the human flagship, Veltheron ordered. Kill their admiral, and the rest will fall apart. Dozens of Valori ships turned toward the Unity. They fired everything they had, but the coalition closed around Chen's ship like a living shield. Kavathi vessels absorbed fire with their ancient hulls. Insectoid drones sacrificed themselves to intercept missiles. Ships from species that had never even spoken to each other before today died to protect a human they had only met weeks ago. And through it all, Admiral Chen continued to coordinate the battle. Calm, focused, unbreakable. The Valori fleet broke. Ships began to surrender or flee. Veltheron's flagship was surrounded, its weapons disabled, its engines dead. Human Marines boarded the vessel. They found Veltheron on his bridge, standing among his fallen officers, waiting for death. Admiral Chen came aboard an hour later. She walked through the damaged corridors until she reached the bridge. Velthorin faced her with the dignity of a commander who had lost everything. "Kill me," he said. That is what the Valori would do. Chen studied him for a long moment. Then she did something he did not expect. She offered him a cup of tea. They sat together in his ruined command center, drinking tea from simple cups, surrounded by the wreckage of his empire. "Your dominion ruled through fear," Chen said. "For 12,000 years, you conquered because others were afraid of you. That kind of power looks strong, but it breaks easily. One defeat, and everyone you ruled starts to wonder if they could defeat you too." Velthorin said nothing. He knew she was right. "We do not want to be the new Valori," Chen continued. "We do not want to rule through fear. That is not who we are." She gestured toward the viewport, where Valori and human ships were already working together on rescue operations. "What do you want?" Velthorin asked. "I want your people to join us, not as subjects, not as conquered enemies, as partners. You have 12,000 years of knowledge we have never seen. Art, science, history, wisdom. That is not something we want to destroy. That is something we want to learn from." Velthorin looked at her with his 4 eyes. For the first time since the war began, he saw humans not as enemies or as threats, but as something stranger, something he had never encountered in all his centuries of conquest. He saw hope. 5 years later, the Valori Dominion no longer existed. In its place stood the Valori Republic, a founding member of the new Galactic Confederation. The species that had once ruled through fear now traded freely with former enemies. Valori scientists worked alongside human researchers. Valori artists performed for audiences across the galaxy, and at the center of the Confederation stood humanity, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as something far more powerful. They were the ones who had shown the galaxy that different species could work together. They were the proof that the old ways of war and domination could end. They were the bridge between worlds that had never trusted each other before. Admiral Chen retired from military service. She spent her remaining years teaching at an academy where humans and aliens studied together. Her students went on to lead joint missions of exploration, pushing the boundaries of known space. She died peacefully, surrounded by friends from a dozen species. Her last words were simple. "We made it," she said. "We actually made it. The galaxy would never be the same." And humanity, the young species that had once seemed so small and weak, had become something the universe had never seen before. They had become the future.